So I'm probably going to be everybody. You guys have say, can you still say?
Over here visiting. I'm Lucy Hennigan from the Friends of Seymour Library, and we do programs like this several times a year. And in August, we will do a program about traveling through history down Boyd Street, which will be very neat. So I hope you all come out to that. And we have a series of music and dessert evenings on Friday nights. Summer Sounds and Sweets, a couple more of those. So on that table back there, there's those schedules, and there's an opportunity to join or pay your dues should you be a little late. The dues are not very much, and they help us. And they help us keep in touch with everybody, and they help us do things with the library. Now I think we've got a great crowd for Delozier. And I'm curious about how many of you know him. Oh my goodness. So how many of you have heard him speak before? How many of you have read his books? Yes. Are you impressed? Okay.
I was going to ask what they know about.
Okay. Well, we're about to hear him. But one more question: how many of you have seen bears from your house? Oh my gosh. Okay.
Thank you, Miss Lucy. I appreciate that very much too. Yeah, I don't care if you know anything about it. It's just what you know is what worries me. So, no, I got some really good friends in the room. And can y'all hear me okay at the mic? My wife says I've got a pretty loud mouth. So anyway, I thought it's just a put on. Anyway, just thinking about some of the people who've been here at Seymour their entire life. Think about what Seymour looked like 50 years ago. If you remember, I graduated in '73, and I remember going to where the Waggles and McDonald's were going in there, and you couldn't see anything except the mountains, except you could see Reed side, going to be on the left-hand side there, one side. You can see Jack Sharp's silo on the right-hand side. That was the only thing you could see. And people used to line up down the road with easels to actually paint the mountain scene down there. So things have changed too. I started in the park in 1978 as a wild boar hunter, and in 1978, guess how many red lights were in Pigeon Forge? The first one was at the Old Mill intersection, and I said, I can't believe it. I'll never get to work with that darn red light. Little did I know what was coming around the corner. So, but anyway, it's good. Somebody said, well, are you concerned about all these people moving in here? I said, you know, I'm really not. If I wasn't here, I'd probably move here too if I had to guess. I think everybody's making the right decision. But it's been a good career for me. It's been a good place to live, to raise my kids and my grandkids in the process right now. Do something pretty good. So we're going to leave time for questions as well. If I start going too long or running around and start coughing or sneezing, and I'll take a hint. But I worked at the park for 32 years, started in '78, I said earlier too, and worked there, worked at the air tanker base during the fire season, started working on bears and pigs, stayed in the backcountry during the spring and summertime, actually hunting wild boar at night time. So that was interesting. I was a little concerned at first. I hadn't been around bears very much at that time, and so not like it is today. But I was a little bit concerned too. So anyway, I remember I did a lot of dumb things. I remember one thing, I was going down the trail listening for pigs, and I saw this white-tailed deer run across the trail. And I saw this really big bear kind of nose up to the wind following this deer, and I thought, I'll have some fun out of this little joker. So I blew like a deer would blow as an alarm signal. The bear looked straight at me, and he made a left turn and come walking straight towards me. And I said, what's he doing that for? Well, the wind was blowing in my face, so I knew he couldn't hear me. But he come out, hit the trail, and kept on coming to me, kept on blowing. And by this time, I was screaming and yelling and doing everything I could do to get his attention. He was not stopping. So I had my shotgun. I said, I can't shoot him. I said, because they'll fire me right on the spot. So I shot my firearm up in the air. he stopped and looked. It probably wasn't me to Chuck right there. He stopped and put his nose up and started smelling and slowly turned away and walked away. You could have touched me and I fell over like a big tree. I mean, I never did that again, so I learned a lot of things in the park. I've got a lot of stories that we'll go on, but the park, obviously, the park is a pretty special place for a lot of people, and, okay, there we go. You know, it's a really diverse park. There's a lot of critters up there, a lot of big things, a lot of small things. It's the tip end of spruce fir forest coming out of Canada, so you get a lot of northern species in there as well. We had, the fisher was there at one time, which is a northern species as well, and so some of those have went on their way. A lot of trails, a lot of streams. The ATVI, the Discover Life in America, it's really they've been finding new things out the whole time. Let's look at the different things. Over 1,500 flowering plants, flowering up slowly. Anyway, 200 bird species, 68 mammals, and it's really a 4-hour drive from a third of the U.S. population. That's why last year we had 14.1 million people, and that's more people than the next 3 national parks added together. So a lot of people come there, and they're just about loving the park to death. So, but anyway, it's something that we have to deal with. So, you know, there's some things on the agenda right now of charging the people parking. Some people think it's great, some people hate it. And so we'll see how that shakes out. The park is a real pretty special place. Really just in our backyard here. But the traffic is pretty bad. Chapman Highway traffic is bad. It's not just in 54, but it's pretty bad. But anyway, so let's go be careful. I will tell really quick, and I'll get into more of the bear stuff here in a minute, but really 3 things that we do. We protect the things that should be our native species, get rid of the hogs in the park, exotic species, then bring back what we have lost, to restore what we lost years ago. That was our fault too. So anyway, how many things do you think that we have taken out of the park since the program began? Roughly how many wild hogs have we, any guesses? 2,000? Now we took out 1,156 in 86. Now that 1 year. Yeah. So we've been over 13, 14,000. But that's just what we've actually collected and doing that. Knock down all the coyotes, kill a little pigs, they prey on the little pigs. So that's a cheap form of government labor to our coyotes too. But anyway, they're always going to be after it. The techniques we used back then is totally different than what it is now. They use thermal imaging. They use for night vision. They have corral type traps that's baited, and the pigs go in there. They turn the camera on. They can watch and see what's in there, and from their home they can decide if they want to drop the door or not. They not wait till the next night. Maybe more pigs come in and get the entire family group. So it's a lot more technically advanced today than what it was when I was there. I retired there 11 years ago, a little over 11 years ago. I left there and started working for Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. I worked there for 9 years on elk restoration throughout the eastern U.S. And then now I work for Appalachian Bear Rescue. So this is my last job, I can promise you that. So it's been a really good job. I'll tell you a story what happened actually yesterday. But, you know, that's, people think that the park is like a place, like the movie Free Willy, that you can release everything up there and still live happily ever after. Well, that's not true. It's a jungle out there. Certain things eat other things for food. And so a lot of people have released raccoons, fox. We've had actually caught one capuchin monkey in the BC that escaped from the Smoky Mountain Zoological Park there on the spur. Somebody's longhorn cow escaped, and we caught it. Actually, we put this hay out, and had a guy go up towards Logap Trail. He jumped her. She come running down through here. Now, I'm not sure you can see it, but right here you can see a little orange dart out there too. So I darted her, sedated her, calmed her down, put a hawk on her, and I think Channel 10 was up there that day. They videoed her, put it on the 6 o'clock news, and we found the owner really quick. So I said, "You want to come get it?" And I said, "No, I'll bring her to you. Don't worry." So we've had emus too. We had Al from the 321. This lady had a group of emus there too. Someone left the gate open, and they went to the park, and it was a fiasco too. And one one lady called me and said that she was attacked by an emu. And I said, could you describe to me what happened? She said, I was sitting in a trail junction on a log, and this big bird came in behind me, started taking me in the back of the head, so I went running down the trail. She said, what should I have done? I said, no, you should have run down the trail. She said, she got away from it too, but anyway, I called her and I said, ma'am, I said, we've got to start doing something. We're either going to have to shoot some of these, or you're going to have somebody come in. She said, well, I hate you have to kill them. I said, we don't want to kill them. I said, she said, maybe you could catch them. I said, well, how do you catch an emu? She said, well, you grab them by the neck. I said, no, will they kick you? She said, sometimes they won't. I said, so sometimes they will. She said, yeah, they can kick sideways before they can kick backwards. So you got to be really careful. So anyway, we had to take one of them out there at Wolf Park headquarters, but anyway, it was actually becoming a wolf thing. We had the red wolves at the park at that time. So anyway, so no more emus, at least I hope. We've had peacocks, we've had, let's see, we've had some cattle. The cows in the park that people have escaped. So we've got a lot of them. Of course, Case Cove, that gentleman here, they work in Case Cove. Yeah, volunteers, we appreciate y'all doing that. 2 million visitors, I think that's what it used to be. I'm not sure now. But a lot of people go to Case Cove. More people go to Case Cove than larger national parks. So a lot of people there, I remember we were bringing elk into the park. I brought a guy in from Northwest, a guy from Northeast. Been managed elk for a long time. And they all looked at Case Cove and they said, I said, what do you think? They said, if I was an elk, I think I would have died and gone to heaven if I got to live here. So we did the evaluation for Cataloochee, for Case Cove, and for Hazel Creek. Of course, Case Cove come back on top, you might think. The superintendent called me up and closed the door and he said, let me tell you something. You are not putting elk in Case Cove. I said, okay. And he said, don't you want to know why? I said, why? He said, 2 million reasons why. He said, a groundhog now will stop all the traffic. We'll stop all the deer, we'll stop all the traffic. A squirrel or something. He said, if you put elk there, we'd have to shut the whole thing. So anyway, so that's Cataloochee is the second choice, and that's why we put elk over in Cataloochee too. And I remember we put some barn owls in Case Cove, and the ranger at Cataloochee said, you don't do anything for us. I mean, do everything for Tennessee, for Case Cove, headquarters, y'all get everything. We don't get nothing. Could you at least not bring a barn owl over here and let it go? Yeah, I can't do that. He didn't know we were looking at Cataloochee as bringing elk. Well, we brought the elk in. It was about 1,000 people at that first release there too. And it was a big deal, to say the least. The ranger there looked pretty worn out too. And at the end of the day, he looked at me, walked up and said, all I wanted was one barn owl. You didn't bring a whole herd of elk over here. But the program really turned out to be a people program. It's a lot of people love that. I won't say too much about this. I've got so many stories, I'll never get through all of them. But the Case Cove, the skunk rodeo, if you read the book, we moved 77 skunks out of Case Cove. We had a little boy Benton out there. And at that time, we did not have coyotes. And so the skunks went wherever. They went under your feet and picnic tables in your camper. If you never camped in Case Cove before, they were wall-to-wall skunks. So anyway, so this little boy was bit. Of course, skunks are one of the species that can harbor rabies. So we're pretty concerned about that. So the superintendent said, you've got to get loose of those skunks out. No. Well, there's not a book that really tells you how to go catch skunks and without getting sprayed too. But we took a little half a cc dart, used ketamine hypochlorite, that's a drug that we used to actually anesthetize them, and had a blow gun, and we went around chasing these little skunks and blowing these darts in there. So anyway, I found out that the skunks that were in the campground were food conditions, and they were not as likely to spray. I said, not as likely to spray. And so the ones in the picnic area at nighttime, they were just losing their fear, and they would spray every time. Anyway, we moved those out to the far end of the Parson Branch Road. Elk, we brought in 52 elk, 2000, 2001, 2002. They came from Elk Island National Park and landed between the lakes. It's a program that worked good. At one point, we had a problem with the bears. See, these elk came from a place that they really didn't have a significant predator at all. They didn't have bears, they didn't have wolves, or a significant number of coyotes to make any impact at all. So we brought them in, and of course the bears are pretty efficient predators. But I mean, we had bears and coyotes both. We can't go from cattlemen to do researches in those fields, go back and forth looking for deer or elk calves after we release the elk too. But let's see, I'll talk more about that in a second. But I'll tell you one of the 3 stories here that Tom Sawyer had. We had an elk that people have been telling us had been moving from Cataloosa once we released it. It's going over towards Silva, going that direction, went all the way almost to Casters in Highlands, North Carolina. And they stopped at a farm called Tom Sawyer Tree Farm. This must have been one of those women that couldn't get along with nobody. I know you don't know anybody like that, but this old girl did not get along with anybody. She stayed by herself for 2 years. But she went by Tom Sawyer Tree Farm. They had 2 caribou there as a novelty thing because he sold Christmas trees. So I can imagine she's thinking, she goes by and looks at those animals and I don't think I look like that, but that's as close as I've seen in the past 2 years. And she stopped there. And it took us about 3 days and we took her back, called her back, put her back. But elk get spread out now, they're outside the park. And so the population is doing much better now. But at one time, around 2006, 2008, as I said before, bears were killing every single one of the calves. And even all the calves that are being born, most all of them are males and not females. So, I mean, if you're trying to reestablish or establish a population, I mean, the boys are a dime a dozen. I'm telling you, the girls are what you want. And so, if they kill a boy, it wasn't a big deal. If they kill one of the females, it was a big deal. So we actually started thinking about what we were going to do because we thought the program was over with. And so we used to move bears, adult bears in the park. And the majority of those would come back to the capture site. So we stopped doing that. We could move some yearlings and have some success. So we had to move at least 40 air miles outside the park to be able to have any reasonable chance that it would come back. So I said, let's think about that in reverse. I said, what if we take all the males, all the adult bears we can during the capture period, put a radio call on them, move them to the other end of the park, knowing that most of them will get back. So by the time they get back, those calves will be large enough and mobile enough they can take care of themselves. They can work like a summer. So we moved bears from 49 cages. We had one big male. I remember we moved him in the fall, I think, or late summer, and he came back the next springtime. We caught him again, took him back over to 20-mile area. In 13 days, he was back in Cataloosa. So they have a tremendous cloning instinct and ability to orient where they are. I'll just mention this really quick right here. We used to use a drug called carfentanil. You heard of fentanyl a lot on the news. But carfentanil, we could knock these adult elk down with less than a cc of drug. So just 2 or 3 milligrams of drug, so we used that too. But we put a collar on them that we basically have to, now these GPS collars, you look on a computer, but we before had to fly airplanes. And we had lost an elk, and so they got an airplane and started flying over around Waynesville, North Carolina. And the signal was coming from Seymour. So he flew the plane over there, they went around it, they said, it's right there at that house. So we thought someone had posted the elk, and that's where the collar was. So we went down, and me and one of the wildlife officers kind of sat there until someone came home, thinking it was going to be the poacher. And then when it was a lady, she pulled the driveway and got out, and I thought, I know her. I said, she's married to one of my guys that work in wildlife. And I'm so thinking, oh no. So all of our guys on the hog program were going to the backcountry by themselves, work at nighttime, and we have a call-in process that they would call in when they went to bed, and I would check the next morning, and if they didn't call in, we would send someone up there. So when they were carrying an old transmitter, if something happened, then we could locate where they were if they didn't call in and didn't show up the next morning. So we had that transmitter. It just so happened that the frequency for that transmitter was very close to the frequency that elk, and they picked it up. So we went inside, and that collar, that transmitter was inside his garage, in a locker, inside his backpack, and it was picking it up from Waynesville, North Carolina. It was amazing. So, anyway, this is crazy stuff that happened. I'll tell you this right here real quick. L15, I said, a lot of these have lost their calves the first year because they're just so naive to predators. So she had hers out there, a bear comes in, they usually swat them in the back, break their back, drag them off, and then and feed on them at that time. But she had her calf, bear come up and killed it. So the next year, she moved away a couple miles, which is kind of normal for elk. Cattle's the same way, they'll move away from the herd, not to draw attention to them, and then they'll have their calf. And then when the calf's mobile enough, they'll actually move back to the main herd. Well, the second year, she moved away, came back with no calf, so we just assumed that she lost her calf. Well, a lot of them would come back from having calf with no calf. You can see these scrape marks here on the side of the ribs where they've been battling with bears. So they got better and better as time went on to be more protective of her calf. The third year, Jennifer, who was the elk researcher, called me and said, Kim said L15 has took off. She's 7 miles up on Balsam Mountain up there. She's probably going to have a calf. So I called the next day, the main scout said there's an elk up here. There's 3 coyotes chasing her down the road. And she's staggering down the road. She's having a calf, or trying to. So he called back and said she dropped the calf up here. And so I said, well, can you stay there until we get there? So we went wide open up there, got up there, and the calf was laying here in the sun. So we covered it up, face up, put a blindfold on it. And I said, where's calendar 15? And where's Mom at? He said, she's right up the hill there. So I looked at her, so we kept on working. We waited, put a collar on it, expandable collar. So we knew if the calf would live or die. And I said, look, Jennifer, I want to pick it up. Set over in the shade, and then we'll get out of the way. Well, I picked it up, that blindfold fell off. And it started going, but that's elk talk. For Mama, this guy's hurting me. I need your help. And I looked up, and she made a beeline out there. Wow. I was froze. I didn't know what to do. I thought, this is it. I'm going to get killed right here. And when she come across that road, Jennifer come right up here and jumped right in front of her and said, stop! And that elk, her feet out, you see her head up. And I said, thank you, Jesus, I've been saved by a woman. So I backed up or something, put it down, and we walked back to the truck and went over to Jennifer, took arm around. I said, Jennifer, I said, thank you for what you did back there. I mean, you kept getting really bad hurt, or maybe even worse. She said, Kim, don't worry about it. She said, you would have done the same thing for me. I went, I don't know if I would have. So anyway, but 3 weeks later, Jennifer said, we'll go back and look for it. Well, about 2 weeks, she called me, Kim, you won't believe what happened. L15 had left her calf up there. She's back to the main herd, 7 miles, straight line distance, back to the main herd in Cali. That baby calf up there by itself. I said, you got to be kidding me. So I said, Jennifer, she said, well, I don't know what to do. Let's just go home and sleep on it. I told her, I'm praying hard tonight too. And I said, we'll get back up to daylight and we'll back on our check. It makes sense. Well, she was up at Cataloochee at daylight. And so she had the receiver box too, and she turned it over to the frequency of the cow, and it's packed, very loud. So she knew the cow was really close. And then she said, well, let me see if I can pick up the calf. I probably can, it's too far away, too much vegetation. She flipped it over to the frequency of the calf. Her eyes got real big on it. It was just about as strong as she said, that's not possible unless it's a lot closer. She went around the curve, and there was that baby calf, and there's his mama counting his thing. So think about that. Sometime after dark, she left the main herd with 7 miles in the dark without flashlight. Found that baby calf, and walked 7 miles back down and was back to the main herd in the morning. Now, how did they do it? It's just unbelievable. It just blows me away. So I'm pretty thankful to be able to work with those elves. So things are going good now. Now let's get to bears. Bears are kind of our simple, the Smokies too. you ask everybody to come to Smoky, what would you like to see? Now, the kids might say something else besides bears, but a lot of the adults say, I want to see a bear. Well, they want to see them, but they want to see them close. And they want to get a picture, and they want to get a close picture too. So it's a lot of gateway communities too that recognize that. I was in Wallace Creek, Square Valley area yesterday, and it's unbelievable the number of times I saw the word bear on signs. Bear Way, Bear Circle, Bear Hill, Bear Play, everything is bear. So bears are pretty important too. So things have changed though over the years. Things are starting to change, get more and more bears and more people too. We worked in Chimmy's picnic area. We were used to move bears all the time. Move in the parks, some would come back. We waited them to come day active, and so we started working more on the garbage. I had it was a 1989, I think. I'm sure I have it up here. But Phyllis Murphy from Ohio was in Chimmy's picnic area picking up rocks or something. The bear came in behind her and jumped over her, actually broke her shoulder blade and cut her several times on her neck. It could have killed her. So anyway, she excuse me. She was in the hospital for about 10 days. So we never looked at bears in the picnic area at nighttime, but we went in and surveyed at night, and there was 12 bears in Chimmy's picnic area at the same time. So that's a lot. What was happening is they lost their fear of people. One of them was started becoming day active because the quantity and the quality of food is better at night in daytime than nighttime. So they're not eating garbage, they're eating the meal itself. So they actually came up and become day active. We catch it, we move it, the other will take its place. So it was just a vicious cycle. We moved 32 bears out of Chimmy's picnic area in a 3-year period. 32. That's more bears than the entire Yosemite Valley in California. I mean, it's unbelievable. I reviewed their bear management plan, and Steve Thompson was their biologist. I said, Steve, how many bears do you think you have in Yosemite Valley? He said, oh, golly, 18, maybe 20. In the whole valley? He goes, yeah, we could have 21, 22. I said, Steve, we can't get that at all. I said, we were moving some bears out of Park Vista. We had 17 bears in the parking lot at Park Vista at the same time. 17. So that's the big difference between West and these two. So we have got a lot of bears. We talked really about the 14.1 million visitors. You think about the tonnage of garbage that 14 million people can bring in, and there's a lot. What's happening now, bears used to be contained just inside the park. So when people used to poach bears back in the 60s or so, 50s and 60s, they had to go in the park, set a bear trap, catch the bear, carry it out, and then they release it where the dogs can chase it. That was normal at that time. They don't have to do that anymore. I told people that the quality of our poachers has gone really downhill over the years. Before they would go in, say 2 or 3 weeks, camping, fishing, and whatever. Now, if they can't shoot out of the window of the truck, they don't do anything. Saying that was tongue in cheek. But anyway, so we have a lot of bears too, and we're getting more and more. What's happened, I think, is that we're having people buy property that never grew up around an animal getting killed, not from a farming background, and so they just can't believe hunting is a part of the situation. So what happens is they feed them. The mothers don't have 2 or 3, which is normal in the wild. They have 4 and 5. So then they protect them, and so you can see what happens. It starts to mushroom. That's where we are right now. And we're going to have someone else hurt, if not worse, too. Have we ever had anybody killed by a bear in the Smokies? Anybody know?
Yes.
2. We'll talk about that second. Of course, Linda Bradley was the one May 21st of 2000. We'll talk more about that. Okay, look at the change down here since 97 from 92 up until today. We got about 500 bears in 92, now we've got nearly 2,000, about 1,900 bears. That's about 2 bears per square mile, or a little over 2 bears per square mile, which is a real high density compared to other parts too. Maine has a lot of bears, British Columbia have a lot of bears, and so the Smokies have a lot as well. Look at the number of park visitors, now it's gone up to over 14, that's not that bad. Look at the number of Sevier County residents, though, from 50,000 in 90 to about 100,000. There's a lot of people here that you all will. So you think about that, a lot of people, a lot of bears. I tell people what worries me is that the bear population probably is close to maxing out. So bears will self-regulate themselves. Typically, when the males get about 3 years old, they become sexually mature, they're kicked back. They go outside of the park looking for females, so that's normally the ones that have come out first too. The mothers will share her territory with the female, but not with the male too. Big male bears will try to kill the cubs. If they have the opportunity, they'll try to kill those. So it's they do self-regulate themselves, but the population has to get pretty high before that occurs as well too. I tell people what worries me is that it's kind of like having an apartment building that's built for 50 people, but if you put 100 people in there, there's going to be some friction. And I think we're probably going to see that more in the Smokies with more bears in the future. So anyway, bear behavior, don't spend much time on this. Offensive, defensive, just tell you real quick, if it's a defensive behavior, it basically means that if you're in its space, it'll be very vocal, it'll pop its jaws, it'll swat the ground, it'll shake the vegetation, it'll lunge at you too. It's being very vocal. It's telling you, you need to back up and get out of my space, and if you're smart at all, you will do that. Don't turn and run, because some bears have got that chase response, kind of like dogs. So you can confront a dog, if you turn and run from it, it's on you pretty quick. So the bears are the same thing there. They're all individual, they have different personalities, and bears have bad bear days too. When all the things happen wrong, they're not in a very good mood. Linda Bradley was killed. She's a local school teacher. They got killed May 21st of 2000. I was in park headquarters working on the health environmental assessment on Sunday afternoon, and I heard the radio traffic. And first they said there's someone injured here someone lost at Elmont because you sent a ranger up here. Then they come back and said, no. Someone has been injured. I'll never forget this. And the bears are still in the area. I looked at that radio and I thought, so I have, of course, my plain clothes on. So I called the dispatcher, who was the only other person in park headquarters. It was Bert, and Bert was Linda's cousin. I said, Bert, play that back for me. He played it back, because that's what I thought. I had a really, really bad feeling. So I called one of my guys and told him to come on that hospital. It was a good friend. Long story short, it was a female with a yearling that actually killed her. It wasn't a predatory attack. So we did look at her as a source of food. Does that happen very often? It does not happen. It's very, very, very rare. All the stars have to line up perfectly for a bear to look at that. And if he changes his mind, I asked Steve Guerrero to go to the bear attacks. I said, Steve, if Glenda had been a guy 6'4", 275 pounds, what would have happened? He said, no. It would not have gone after a guy that big or a lady that big at all. So I didn't want to say a lady 6'4", 275. But anyway, he said they'll size you up too. And if you appear to be weak or scared and you run or something, that they know that too. So you've got to stand up to them, which is hard to do. I'll tell you, it's hard when the bear's charging you. It's hard to stand up to them, but it's the right thing to do. With tongue in cheek, I tell people, they say, well, what if I encounter a bear in the park? What should I do? I said, well, I first would take someone you can outrun. I would do that. They said, are you serious? I said, no, I'm not serious. But you've got to convince that bear that you're bigger and meaner and more dominant while they use it. It's hard to do. You've got to do that to protect yourself from people. Look up there at some of the predatory behavior. Focuses on smallest person, which makes sense. Elora Petrosek there, that second person was killed. She was a 6-year-old, but the bear attacked her 3-year-old brother first. The mother went on the attack, actually the fence, and actually got her little boy away from that. Elora went somewhere, and the bear found her and killed her too. So that was back in 2006. That was right around the Easter, when I was down and had a meeting with the guys there as well. Patrick Madura, he was September 11th, about a year and a half ago too. He was camping by himself over in Hazel Creek. The bear apparently killed him as well. One thing I tell you, I advise people, I would not sleep in hammocks in the park. I can tell you numerous cases where bears have either bit someone or pulled someone out of the hammock. So I talked to someone today, and they said that, you know, so-and-so, he slept in a hammock. I said, I wouldn't let even my family sleep in a hammock, because it puts them at eye level with no barrier between them. And you may have some kind of smelling device doing the file and then grab them and pull you. But I wouldn't advise anybody to sleep in a hammock inside the park. Or sleep out of the stars. I would sleep inside the tent. Anything else here? Okay, some of the other signs. Normally there's no human food involved, predatory behavior, no history, no prior history of bear, the persistence of the attack. Let's see it here as well. There was a little boy up at Rainbow Falls parking area, or trailhead, was attacked by a bear there. He was with his brother and his dad, but he went after him first. And his brother got turned around, and he was actually walking away, and the bear put his paws on his shoulder and was pushing him down. He said his mouth was wide open as he went there. Sir Rick hit through here and on his back, and his dad was on his back. He told him, he said, run, son, run. So he took off running. The bear went one way and hit him again, knocked him down. So the dad had to jump on the bear the second time. So the persistence of the attack, they play for kids too. Generally occurs in spring and fall, which makes common sense. You know, they're hungry when they wake up, obviously, and they have to prepare for the winter time. So those are two pretty important periods for bears. Tell people basically, you know, carry pepper spray. It'll even the store. If you don't think that you're less of a person by carrying it, because it'll help you in certain situations. It's not a cure-all, though. Excuse me, you cannot spray it on your tent or around your campsite. I think it's going to keep it away. It's organic, and it serves as an attractant. So it'll draw bears in, it will draw them bears away. So what it works as is a bear that's on you or on somebody you spray the side, the right side. See, this one thing I thought about, I'll leave the story of the news. He's going to run the bear because usually, you know, when the bear injures someone, we have to put the bear down, which is unfortunate. But I guess the data shows that one of the bear does attack someone, goes into a tent, or injures someone, it has a tendency to repeat that behavior, so we have no choice for them. We had another bear was cut on the exit side of the loop, and everybody's been very, very good. They were at the roadside taking pictures. This one guy, anybody here from Alabama? Come on.
Would they admit it?
Okay, this guy was from Alabama, right? But he went down the road, went up on the hill, and come back around behind me to get a really close shot. When he come up, there's a big log there, and he kind of looked over the log, surprised the cub, they went every direction. The mother saw him, and she took off after him. So he took off running as fast as he could, and I was talking to him. He said, it was like somebody just come up behind me and hit me behind and knocked me down. But when it did, it knocked him into this big tree that was down with dead limbs and protruding, sharp limbs on it. And one of them hit a whole front, right in his private part, and really did some serious damage to him. So he kind of waddled up to the ranger station and told him to speak to the male ranger. And the lady said, well, look, I can help him. Nodded, talk to the male ranger. But he said, don't worry about it. So he went on the hospital and stuff like that. Well, he went back to Alabama. And the press caught wind of it. And they crucified him in his local town. They made him out to be an absolute fool. And so he threatened to, I remember he threatened to the park. He never did that. Yeah, I bet he probably never did that anymore. So yeah, we'll talk more about that. I won't get to do it all. What can we live with bears? We can live with bears too. It takes effort, it takes common sense, and a lot of people don't have common sense. They may be very intelligent, have common sense, but when they see a bear, they go brain dead just like that. So if I got time, I'll tell the story of Lake and Emmett, which is probably my favorite bear story. But what's the answer to it? What's Bear Wise is the answer. Bear Wise is a label that basically is telling people that what we always have known before, what you should do around bears. And so I work with Appalachian Bear Rescue now, And, we're kind of running the Bear Wise program. It's an educational program. We have the ability to be able to go in and work with someone and say, this is a problem, you can change this, you can compare garbage cans, you can put bird feeders out. If they comply with all that, they can be basically recognized as being a Bear Wise business or a Bear Wise school or a Bear Wise community, whatever. So we're just now getting started with that. We've got to finish up with the villages there in Gatlinburg, 17 businesses. But they had the same garbage disposal system for 50 years. So we convinced them to spend some money and bear through their garbage cans. So they said it's the world of it. It's common sense things. It's, never feed or approach bears. People know that, but obviously people don't always do what they're supposed to do. Make sure you fill out your food and garbage and recycling. So they'll do most of it. Well, I didn't know they would come right up here on my porch to get this. Well, they will. They sure will. If you equate intelligence to science of brain, primates are number 1, bears are number 2. What do you think? Number 3. Pigs. Pigs are number 3. And so they can remember a long time. And so we can work with the bear, do some aversive conditioning on it. When it's in a stress time, we'll release it, it'll stay on for 3 or 4 or 5 years, never see it at all, until we have another food failure, and then we'll come right back into where it's getting food before. So they have a tremendous memory. Of course, bird feeders everybody loves to feed birds, and that's one of the things that the first thing that draws bears in the communities are bird feeders. And I know people love to do it, and it's fine, but when bears are active or something, or bears are in your area, bears are in our area right now, I can promise you that. I was at the beach last week, I got a picture on one of my cameras of a bear standing up on his hind legs. And I didn't notice the first time it was cut the base of it. So, I can remember right after I retired from the park, that I hit one over on Shallow Church Road, a bear. I'd never been a bear in my life in the park, but I hit one there on our road. It didn't kill it. So, saw someone in Boyce Creek. I saw that. Anybody see that picture there? Somewhere out Boyce Creek. So they're here to stay. They're not going to be able to leave. What do you think in the park they use big root balls instead of the big trees that fall down, or the pure forward, they'll actually dig and hollow cavities up off the ground. What do you think? What would they do here outside the park if they don't have that same thing? Happens all the time in Waresville, I can tell you. Under porches and houses. They will go under there, and usually the cabins don't even be there, the owner, but we had one that's seen on TV last year, that was in a house over pretty close to 54, but she had 3 cubs in there too. So we actually run her away thinking she was a male. Yeah, it was a male, but it turned out to be a female with 3 cubs. So we kept the cubs for a while, and then she came back, and we reunited those 2. So it does work. So also, very common sense thing: clean and store your grills, never leave pet food outdoors, and alert your neighbors to bear food. So that's a pretty simple thing. We're trying to recognize people who do the right things with around bears. Because we know we're killing bears. I mean, I don't know how many bears killed this year. The park killed 1 year recently. The state I know has killed a couple here recently, and so it's going to happen a lot more. It's unfortunate. It's our fault, and we're allowing it to happen too. It's just people seem like they live for the moment. They don't necessarily think it's a big deal. It's a big deal. Well, why do you want to be bear wise? It helps bears, no doubt about that. Because what happens is you're protecting the integrity of the whole bear population. So if a mother bear, it becomes food conditions, she trains her cubs to be food conditions. They grow up, they do the same thing, the cycle gets going, so it affects the whole integrity of the bear population. Of course, obviously it affects people, keeps bears away from people. It's good for your image, it's a good image. It can help protect your business, your liability. If you know bears are getting your garbage and you're putting people in a hazardous situation, it can absolutely, you're liable, I think, for that. It never gets challenged, but I've talked to several lawyers and said, yeah, they potentially are liable. It's just the right thing to do. I mean, it's just the right thing to do to protect bears and do the right thing. Appalachian Bear Rescue I work for now, I just found out they took in 1, 2, 4 cubs yesterday. Now they have 356 bears. I think we're getting 3 more, hopefully, well, sometime in the next few days too. I won't talk too much about that. But this, yesterday was interesting. Chuck had called me. I was pretty active at that time. But did anybody hear about the cub with the jug on his head? Well, I was gone to the beach last week, and ABR and the state have been out there for 7 or 8 days looking for this cub. Time they get there, it was gone. And so I don't know if they was alive after 7 days. So I was over at a 90-acre tract of property, and someone saw this over at one of the resort areas and said it's here now. And they took a picture of it, and they Googled bear rescue, and Appalachian Bear came up, and they called them. And she said it to me, and I said, I'm on my way. So I went over there and looked at the picture, and I thought, this cabin right here, it's right here. You can see the jug on his head. So I knew the direction it was aiming, so I looked at this little draw, and I got probably 50 or 60 yards down my list, and I could hear it really, really thick. Then I heard something, it sounded like something climbing on bark. And this bear was on this tree here, about 3 foot from the ground. So I took off running, screamed and yelling, run that little sucker up the tree, and called everybody. I said, come down here now, we've got up the tree. We put a ladder up there. The new bear lady went up there and put the catch pole over it, hopped it on the jug, it pulled the jug off, we had the jug off. Long story short though, we stayed there and built a fence around this tree so that little rascal couldn't get away, because obviously he needed some help. And he wouldn't go in the trap, he'd go in, he would not trip to the trap. So I guess about midnight last night, Floyd Blair, the curator over there, actually came down and sat on the side of the tree where he could get a catch pole, and he called him, took him to the vet school, and was over there. So that's a happy ending, but it was pretty stressful at the time. All right, you know, are we smarter than the average bear? I used to think we were, but I don't know if bears have got smarter or people have got dumber. I'm not sure which one, or if it's a little bit of both. It could be. But when I first got started, you see the bear here, this left-hand picture. That thing's on a cable. It's balancing itself like in a circle. This ain't climbing out that way on it. Oh my goodness gracious. Anyway, but that's they're very, very healthy. You can see them. We put up the food storage cable systems throughout the backcountry. I did that years and years ago as well. But you can see a bear sit down and he'll look. It'll look over where the food stacks are. You look back at the tree, it's just like the cogs are turning its brain trying to figure out. We've had some cubs climb up on the back trying to reach it from the mother. We've had mothers go up there. We used to have pizza pans on the end of it so that mice and squirrels couldn't get out the back. So anyway, so every critter trying to get up there, but the only trouble we've had is when a tree falls or if something's not working properly, we'll get a lot of complaints and people won't get fixed. I won't spend much time with Bear 75. It's probably the most famous bear in the park. Traveled over 1,500 miles. Bill Landry, he's on the Heartland series. This was in the late 80s. I said, we got to cover this. We got to do a story on this bear. This bear is unbelievable. I hauled him from Case Cove all the way to Harrisonburg, Virginia. He was asleep the whole way. And Jerry Blaine, the bear biologist, he said, I've released 200 bears in this one area right on the West Virginia border. He said, everyone would jump out of the truck, run to the door, and was gone. The Bear 75 had a collar on, jumped out of the truck, running about 50 yards, started looking around, started bobbing his head. Then he looked to the south and started going to the south just like that. They don't have rods and cones in their eyes like birds do. So Jerry said, I run down the woods trying to run him back, got around him. He averaged 10 to 12 miles south every single night. Went all the way back down to Whitfield, Virginia. They caught him walking through the community there, took him back farther north, almost into Maryland. And same thing, 10 to 12 miles south every single night. He went back through Roanoke, and the police chased him through Roanoke, and they darted him with a drug that's called rhombomer xylazine hydrochloride, which is a sedative that doesn't knock him out. So he's really groggy, sedated. They rode Bear 75 and pulled him to the back of a policeman. I said, well, You know, I don't know, who decided who was gonna drive that police van, but I'd like to fly on that wall. So anyway, they took him outside, pulled the car off accidentally, and then they released him. He came back into Tennessee, Virginia, and TWRA called and said, we've got one of your bears. I said, how do you know it's there? He said, it's got your tag in it. So what's the number? 75. He said, I caught this same bear last year in the same spot at the VA hospital parking lot in Johnson City. 1 year apart. And it doesn't have a good ending, at least for that bear. But they moved him, moved 400 miles up there from the park. But he actually went, they released him, and someone shot him illegally. He's eating blackberries and stuff. And so there's a big reward system, and no one was ever caught. They think they know who did it, but anyway, his life was not really in vain, losing his life, because he made me understand what the role of garbage was. He said, if we can keep our garbage up, bears will take care of themselves. So that's kind of what we do. You know, working in the park has just been a joy for me. I wouldn't change one thing if I had to do it all over again. I tell people it was meant to be. The job was given to me. I remember going to the park headquarters in 1978. Never set foot in that building. And I walked in, no computers, and I said, he said, what kind of job? He said, we're hiring people to hunt wild boar. And I said, do you pay them for that? He said, we don't pay them much, but yeah, we do pay them some. So spent 45 minutes with me about my experience. And he said, write your name and number down, and I'll call you in a few days and let you know. So I wrote my name down, and he looked at me real funny. I said, what's wrong? He said, I just finished reading your application before you walked in the door. So I don't think that's a coincidence. I think it was definitely a blessing was given. So I've been very, very, very blessed to have that too. I probably have got just a few more minutes too. I'd like to tell you a story about him and Blake. It's one of my best stories about bears. Y'all want to hear it or not?
Yes.
Okay. Blake worked for me. He was 6'4". We were all country boys in Illinois trying to get a job in wildlife. He actually wanted to develop a good resume. So back in the earlier times, back in the 80s, if we closed a camp back at the campsite, I would just leave it closed for a while, and and then after about 3 weeks or so, when natural food became available, reopen. I was kind of rolling the dice a little bit, but we didn't have cameras and things like that at the time. So we were ready to reopen that campsite 49, which is the end of Bradley Fork, up from Smokemonk. And I said, Blake, would you take Emma and go up there and camp there for a couple nights? No bears show up, and obviously, we'll reopen. So the first night, though, nothing happened. Emma had already told me beforehand, too. She called me, she's from England, real pretty girl, just a sweetheart. She said, can I come over to the park and work with you guys? And I said, well, I think so. I said, well, what's your interest? Well, I've got a couple of things that bother me. And I have a fear of bears, and I want to try to overcome that fear of bears. But she said, I also have a fear of Southern men. I said, Southern men? I said, could you tell me more? She said, well, here in England, we think people from the South, men, if they see a woman, they run around and chase them. I said, what do they do to them? She goes, well, I don't know. They've never told us that. I said, Emma, look, I said, that might be a couple of people chase you, but I think you're probably pretty safe to come over here and walk around. So she had those 2 fears in her head. Nothing happened the first night. Second night, she sat there at Blake's asleep. Emma could hear horses, sound of horses riding up. So they got closer and closer. Now this campsite is closed. It's at the end of the trail. So people are just not riding by at 12 o'clock. Probably people coming there, knowing there's bears there, they're going to basically shoot some bears illegally. So she said, I could hear them getting closer and closer. She said, you know what I thought? I went, no, she said, I thought it was a Southern men. They knew where I was at. They didn't come to get me. But she said they mumbled something, and I could wake Blake up, and they turned around and left. So a few minutes, she heard something else out there. Blake's still asleep, and she could hear an animal walk around the tent, and it was pushing on the tent. So she said, Blake, wake up. There's some animal out there. I think it's a bear, but I'm not sure. It blow over once in a while. Went around, and Blake sat up in the tent, and he was pushing down on his feet area with his nose or paw. What he did, he hauled off and backhanded it as hard as he could. The bear bear jumped back and it got really quiet. It jumped up in the air on top of the tent, ripped the tent open, reached and got a hold of his foot, which was in his sleeping bag, and started pulling him out of the tent. Emma, she freaked out, as you might guess. You couldn't see anything. So she grabbed Blake's arm. She was trying to pull him back to the tent. The bear was pulling him out. So anyway, there was a little tug of war. Well, Blake remembered he had his pistol in his pack, and he kind of reached over and got his backpack, put the pistol, shot a couple times, scared the bear, and the bear moved back. They yelled and screamed, and the bear actually moved away so they could clean the tent up. Blake wanted to clean everything up, leave a clean tent, leave no trace. Emma didn't want to worry about leaving no trace. She was ready to get out of Dodge. So they didn't walk down the 5 miles down to the campground. Got there, nobody was there working. Of course, it was close to 3 o'clock in the morning. Combo was going home. So Blake said, let's just go here in one of the restrooms and we'll lay down in there until daylight when somebody comes to work. So they went to the women's restroom. Blake went down and I said, what did y'all do? I said, I laid down in one of the stalls and went to sleep. I said, what did Emma do? He said, she got over the corner of the room there. And got her back in the corner and put her knees up to her chest and had a hatchet and was looking straight forward. I said, Blake, how can you sleep with a woman holding a hatchet? He said, I was really tired. So Emma's laying there just like, bright-eyed, listening, looking. She hears something outside. I said, Blake, get up, the bear has followed us down here. So come on down. So he gets up, walks around the restroom, nothing second. So he said, it's nothing here. The bear didn't follow us down. So he takes his backpack and he wedges it under the door so that the door will not open. So he dozes off again. Emma kind of dozes off again. Well, about 5:30 or 6 o'clock, this little lady wanted to go to the restroom. So she goes up and she grabs that handle. She's pulling that handle as hard as she can. And Emma looks up and sees that door coming and says, Blake, get up. The bear's coming through the door now. So he wakes up and jumps over and kicks that door with his big 14-size boots and knocks that little lady out on the ground. So she's laying there on the ground and Blake opens the door up. And she said, I just wanted to use the restroom. He said, well, come on in, man. I said, no, I'll go to the inside. I never got to talk to her, though. I don't know what she told her party. It had to be something like, don't go down to that restroom. So when they were shopping, and that could have been a house. Luckily, it was not so too, but it definitely scarred both of them for life. But I was talking to him when we were done, and Blake was afraid I was going to fire him for using firearm. I said, no, Blake, you did whatever you had to do to be able to get that bear away. So Emma said, Emma, are you okay now? She said, I'm okay right now, but that 5-mile walk down the trail, she said, I sure did talk to God involved a whole lot that night. And she said, can I ask you a question? I said, sure. She said, are there any churches around here? Oh, yeah, there's plenty of churches around here. I go to a little Baptist church. No, I'm Catholic. Yeah, go to my mom. He's Catholic. She went to church every single Sunday before she went back to England. So there were some promises made. I can promise you that night. So she went back to England. I forget this. She texted me and said, thank you for the experience. I said, no thanks necessary. And I said, do you still want to work with bears as a career? She said, oh, I think so. I think I will, but probably only on the computer, never outside ever. But anyway, I hadn't seen her since I left after Blake now went to school and got his PhD, so now he's the resource manager for Theodore Roosevelt. I'm with the coach right now, so he's done really well. I'm through right now. Any questions you have right now? We've got the 09. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Back when I was in regular college, back in 1958, and my mom and dad brought me down and went through the Smokies on the way. And we went out like Cleveland's over and all that. Park rangers were out busting watermelons alongside the road, right there.
I don't doubt that.
That was in the 50s? In the 50s. And we stopped, there was a bear across the road from us eating watermelon, and we stopped there, and someone had stopped over by the bear with a reflex camera, was coming up, and the bear was doing this, and I started going, kitty bear, kitty. So mom, dad, we could probably look at.
Back then, everything was wrong, everything. People didn't know what they should do, what they shouldn't do.
Yeah,
And open garbage can,
Right.
open garbage can, bear population 400, 500, less than that probably then. And people saw more bears then than a lot of them do now. But they were garbage bears, they were open garbage cans.
Yeah.
I know a guy, he said he knew of a guy that would take some meat and one of the garbage cans up there, he would take it and put a plastic cap in it, inside it, and throw the meat over the bank, and then he would, of course, the line would come out, the wire would come out, hit the battery, and he'd kill the bear. So I think rangers used to shoot bears all the time. They got the reputation of taking them down to the Gatlinburg dump and dumping them, which is between Gatlinburg and Kingston. Well, that was true, I don't know, but I heard them saying so. Yeah, when we were starting, 4 of us started working in wildlife management, and that was the first people working in wildlife, exclusively in wildlife, in the history of the park. So it was a good thing too. Yeah.
A lot of people now are having backyard chickens. Is that a big attractor for bears? I would think so.
Yeah, chickens are attractive for a lot of stuff. Weasels, raccoons, fox, coyotes, things like that. And yeah, it's always a risk. Anytime you have that's a prey species. So yeah, bears will come in. Cattle the same way. When there's no food, natural food, they'll kill cattle as well too. So yeah, dogs, things like that. Coyotes are more apt to kill cats and things like that. But yeah, oh yeah, chickens. Electric fences are really good.
Does having a dog with you affect the risk with the bear around?
Say that one more time.
Does having a dog with you affect your risk with the bear?
It all depends on the bear, it all depends on the dog. If you've got a bear that's a little bit timid and really hungry, it doesn't take much yelling at it or barking at it to take off. But a bear that's really hungry, he's losing weight. Anytime you're losing weight, it's just like when you're going to die. A lot of times you're not in a good mood. You're not in a good mood. And so they'll be pretty persistent to be able to get food from you too. Yeah, and some bears, or some dogs, depending on how aggressive they are, you know, then, but they can kill them as well too. They had one case in Kentucky where the guy had a dog and the dog started barking and went after the bear. The bear attacked the guy. So it's just a moving target. You really don't know how that animal will respond because they all have different personalities. They all have, like I said, they all have good days and bad days. Question? Yes, ma'am.
So do they, we here at the school, the moms go down, they had a bear up in a tree that the kids would see when they're out in the school practicing. They said that the school had called and put no one to come and get it anymore, so you don't come and get them and take them any place, you wait for them to eat what they had tree after a couple of nights and those comes out. That's what
Yeah, bears don't come by just to visit you for, you know, for have tea or coffee with you. They're coming to your house for a reason too. If they go through your property, they may be going to somebody else's property where they're getting food. But there's always a reason why they're there. Now, when they're starving to death, you know, losing weight or something too, they're just not going to act normal. And if they have teeth problems, then they just don't act normally. They'll try to get food any way possible they can. So, but if you clean everything up too, they might come and visit, but they're not going to stay with you. Time is important to them, so they've got to go somewhere where they can get food. Yes, sir.
Blackberries will be in season here in a couple of weeks. So.
Yeah, you'll start. Yeah, it is. Typically, the breeding season's now, and you'll start seeing females following or males following females around. And so, yeah, that's a problem as well too. They're not normally after food; they're after something else. So, yes.
We're on the path between park boundaries and the park vista. Have they modified it? You said they modified something up there because they attract bears looking back.
You know, a lot of those bears were traveling to a spot. Park Vista had open garbage cans at one time. You know, right outside of Park Vista, they have a big building there, the dumpsters on the inside. We were supposed to have the International Bear Conference there, and we found out what they were doing there at Park Vista years ago. on the side of the hotel there that faced the dumpsters, they were charging a premium for rooms on that side that people could see bears. And so, but the manager would tell me, oh, we don't want nobody hurt, we don't want to hurt the bear. So it was just lip service too. So we pulled out, and Dr. Mike Pelton called Park Business and said, we're not gonna have it there. So they were gonna lose $150,000 that week. He called me up and said, you have got to. I said, I can't today. He said, please come up here just for a few minutes. I said, what can we do to change that? I said, it's not hard. You have got to keep your garbage cans in a manner that bears can't get garbage out. He said, what if we build a big building right here, put them inside there? As long as you keep the doors closed. So they spent $30,000 that time, built that building, put them all inside. But sometimes the liability thing's just coming around the curve. Wait till somebody sues someone else for having open garbage cans, and they know it, and they're not changing anything, and it comes and hurts or kills their dog, their kid, or whatever too. It'll be a big deal. It'll shake people up. Yes, ma'am. Sorry about the sunlight.
Do you have a third bear in the backseat coming out?
You know what we've got? Yes and no. I'm the problem with that too. We've got another one, a book about half written called Hall. And it's probably the next one's gonna come out with 5 good time to work on it too. But it's about people used to hunting the park in the 50s and 60s. I mean, it was just part of the culture at that time. But it's not about killing animals too. It's about people getting lost and getting arrested by rangers. So it's a cat and mouse game between rangers and the folks at that time. So we interviewed a lot of the old timers. A lot of them have passed on as well too. It's really funny, some of the things. They chase bears, but bears also chase them too. So it's been pretty fun. Yes, sir.
When you get a bear to attack somebody or kill somebody, and they come down with them, how do they look at a bear?
Before DNA, we had to go on behavior, we had to go on appearance. In the case of the Elora Petrosek, they actually got, that was the DNA, they actually got human flesh under the claw of this bear. They put the wrong one down first because it was caught in the same area, but they did catch another one a mile away and it had human flesh in its claw. So now they actually will, sometimes will release them. If it does something, they'll release it with a GPS collar, and if that behavior continues, then they put it down. So typically, DNA now is going to be the way they link the two. And let's come back to Viking before DNA. A guy got drug out of his hammock at Elmont Campground. So I called Bill Stiver to come over, who's the bear or the wildlife biologist now. And I said, come over here right now, because he was in North Carolina. I said, you got to set a trap. I said, caught a bear, a male bear. And I said, well, because I was getting ready to leave. I said, have you got the right bear? He said, I think so. I said, how do you know that? He goes, well, it's got the right size. The guy said it's the right size. It's in a campsite that we've not had any history of bear problem. I said, but how do you know that? Well, I don't know that, he said. I said, well, let's just keep on trapping. We put a trap the next night. Guess what? Got the second bear, same size, same location. Dang. So one of them is right and one of them is wrong. I said, Bill, how do you know if it's one of these two? He said, keep on trapping. I said, keep on trapping. So we kept on trapping for 3 or 4 more nights calling. So we have 2 bears. One of them's guilty, one of them's not guilty. So what do you do? Same size, teeth marks on the person's leg, canine distance is exactly the same before DNA. So what do you do? For both of them. People call me some bad names. So I said, look, I don't enjoy doing this. I've had to put cubs down that we had no choice at all before Appalachian bear rescue. So it's not a pleasant thing to do at all. But you got to put the human safety first, and you've got to be pretty conservative in what you do because you don't know how they're going to act. So, yes, ma'am.
Is there any future in relocating bears to another place in the country? It sounds like they can find their way back to it, but if the population gets too much, like the elk program, bringing them in, can you ship bears out?
Yeah, it used to be much easier than what it is now. Now, nobody wants your bears anymore. If a bear has a history, let's say, for example, a bear scratched somebody. So swatted somebody. I had to go through the process. I would call the state bear bond and said, hey, this bear bit somebody. Do you want it? Well, no, we don't want it. No. I said, okay. Then I called Forest Service. This bear bit somebody. Do you want it? No. So I put back to the superintendent. There's nowhere to put it, so we put the envelope. There's no place out there that bears that you can put them that there's no people. There's not. They move so far, it's unbelievable, and there's no place you can put it. You can be successful if they just start losing their fear of people. If you move it during that period before they get really conditioned, your success rates are much higher. The younger the animal, the success rate is higher. But the old animals, they are very territorial, and they're very apt to come back to where you got them. And then Bear 75 would come back to the Case Cove, and he would do exactly the same thing he did before. Wasn't dangerous, but he was a garbage bear. Yes, ma'am.
Do you find that all the cabins, that are up there, do you find that, or do you think that people feed the bears that come in there, the tourists?
Yes.
I think so too.
Everything happens. I've been surprised. I probably looked at 200 cabins yesterday. Most of them had bear-resistant garbage cans, which I was very thankful. But it doesn't take but just a few to do the damage.
Yeah.
And so I've got some pictures. It's just unbelievable. So the state had to catch another bear with 3 cubs yesterday, and it's just unbelievable. The bear was just sleeping right beside the garbage the entire time. And so most people, I think, are starting to do the right thing. I think the liability is going to make a lot more people. If we get someone gets sued, someone's going to get killed, and I hope it's not someone. I hope it's nobody. But it just kills me that Elora Petrusek, the little 6-year-old girl, she was just a little sweetheart. You can look up, you can Google Elora's life and see her. It just breaks your heart and stuff too. And so that's the purpose of bear life, is to protect people. Any more? Yes, sir.
I noticed a picture, someone's showed me of a bear picking up bird feeder that had a red ear tag on it. Would the color of the ear tag mean anything?
Not really. The state would put a red ear tag just so you can see it better. Well, we used to years ago, red meant danger and more danger, but it doesn't anymore.
And the bottom line of park was a double set of dumpsters down there for years. But there was a bear, no about smart there. One big bear. They're huge now. He figured out he could lean on that dumpster and take his feet and kick gravel under it and keep leaning on it.
Oh,
Lean on it. And he raised it all the way up to where he could then just push it over. And he could bend the doors up. It's like he's using
Using logic that is
leverage on his dumpster. If I just keep pushing that gravel in there, it'll eventually get high enough I can push it over. And it was amazing.
in Chimney Spitney here, we had the skid, we called the skid plate. We had to lengthen those out the bottom so they couldn't turn them over too. But we had one bear that had only one good rear leg, so he would actually rock those dumpsters and keep on rocking and turn them over. So I thought, I'll fix him. So I set a dumpster on tires to insulate it, and I put electric fence on it. I electrified it. I said, I'll show him. But he didn't turn that one over. He went down and turned the next one over. So yeah, I couldn't win. So any more questions? Anyway, time's up. Oh, I'm sorry, one more question. Yeah, I can. Yeah, I hate to appreciate the value of it, but I will. So, yeah. Anyway, thank you all.